Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Miljan, Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this another level.
The thing that I remember is Alistair didn't want to be known as a lightweight anything. He goes, yeah, guys, being called a lightweight, that's not good.
How did Peter Code impact your career, and how did you meet Peter originally?
Yeah, I believe it probably started through me looking for some object-oriented information and books.
Yeah.
So I'm because I remember reading a few different authors, but Peter Code initially was co-authoring with Ed Jordan for like object-oriented analysis, then the object-oriented design. So I think that might have been the first introduction to Peter. And then I believe I met him in some conference, I want to say maybe in New York in '92 or something like that. And then I discovered the UML modeling tool, just the baby version of what became the TogetherSoft control center.
Yeah.
But it was expensive. So I was at that time working in a Defense Department contractor, and I was in the aerospace group, and there was a software group, but I was kind of leading the charge with object-oriented and C++ and things like that, whereas the core team was Fortran or C and things like that. So I found this tool that they were advertising that kept models and code in sync. Up until that time, I was doing PowerPoint modeling and sequence diagrams in Excel and things like that. So it was good for design and doing it, and then pretty soon you just threw it away and you were left with your code. So that really intrigued me, but it was like, I want to say $1,200. And so I asked, could I please get it in like 3 installments so my wife doesn't get because I couldn't, I wasn't getting my company to pay for it. I was paying for it.
Yeah.
So, then I had a little personal exchange with him at that point. And so that kind of sparked a relationship. And it really grew from there through the mid 90s. I remember helping them voluntarily, being like a groupie, helping them on essentially getting things ready to release, to be put on a Borland, like a CD. And, so that was interesting. Lessons learned about what it takes to publish something and having to have things ready, way ahead of time. And then once they're ready, they can't be changed because they already were put into the document, things like that. It's like, I can change the configuration and we can support that. Well, no, you can't. Oh, yeah, I can. Look, no, let me explain. We've already cut the, oh, I get it, because they have to put it on a CD. So
Exactly.
that was back in the day when like the publishing was a lot more rigid. So so then I started working with the team pretty closely, kind of behind the scenes and voluntarily. Yeah, so that's how it started. That's how I met him.
So what was Peter? What is he like? In a sense, like in what ways? I know you at least a couple of times that I've heard you. You mentioned how he drilled the importance of frequent delivery, and in what ways, similar to that, like did he influence your thinking and kind of the way that you think about software development?
Yeah, I think he was an electrical engineer. I'm an aerospace engineer. We both were very visually oriented, modeling and systems and a holistic approach. So I think a lot resonated there. And he kind of, I would say, was my object-oriented mentor. And then certainly the feature-driven development, kind of going along that vein. I think the first couple things that 95, I also formed my own company, but I was like subcontracting to Peter. So I was still, like involved doing stuff for, at that time it was Object International.
Yeah.
So I was doing stuff with him to, do some Java courses, do some OO courses, and provide consulting. So I would kind of do that as part of my own company, and do consulting with Peter Codes and clients and things like that. And then it just sort of, there was an opportunity with the European organization to kind of get out from under some other relationships with another organization. So we were able to form a new company called TogetherSoft. So he had brought my family down to North Carolina, and kind of, this would have been mid to late 90, probably summer of 99 or September-ish, something. Yeah, some late summer of 99. And then he basically like popped the question. All right, John, we have an opportunity here. Let's quit your company, quit the company that you founded. And let's join, and let's get a few people to start up this new TogetherSoft. So I kind of went half-time with my own company for a few months, and then the beginning of 2000, we really had that's when we kicked off with a handful of a team. So we kind of threw it out of his basement, so to speak. There was a cadre of initial folks. So I was no longer the only outside sales guy / technical implementer / product owner. We were able to hire some people, and yes, it was a phenomenal. It was like 10 years shoved into 3. Kind of what it felt like.
That's awesome. And just a couple of things that just made me think about, just like going to conferences. Like one of the things that I've missed over the last year and a half is like those relationships. Like you said, you met Peter probably for the first, you communicated, but you met him at the first time. And like I can just reflect back on how many relationships I've developed just through conferences. And he was also for listeners that don't fully know, he was one of the people that got invited to Snowbird, and he said, hey, John, you go, right? And you go there, and you've talked about something that stood out to me, the way you said somewhere that Martin Flower was such a good facilitator during the 2-day, or you guys joke around, it wasn't really 2 days, it was half a days, and the rest was skiing and drinking. But can you maybe talk about like who maybe start with Martin, how he said like at one point he asked you guys to write something on index cards or something like that, and then throw it down on the floor. Can you maybe talk about that? And I have a couple of questions and a couple other people, but
I think
can we start with that?
I found some of my notes. I believe if you Googled Agile Uprising, you'd go to some website that
with Ryan,
Ryan, so he's a good friend, and a nice interview over beer.
Yeah, it was too. I was actually listening to that, and it was like you guys were sitting at the bar or somewhere, because there was a lot of noise in the background.
Yeah, it was basically his phone sitting on a beer glass. So I think that might have been his first, not as professional as later interviews. But so there's some documentation floating around, maybe even on my Flickr account, I don't know. But I recall that the beginning, before we got to some of the like the exercises you referred to, it really was a little bit of a introduce yourself and give a little synopsis of your development techniques.
Yeah.
And, I had created a lightweight process before it was called Agile, almost out of self-defense, but published it in, of all places, like a Lotus Notes book. So I kind of had blended, mostly from my DoD experience, a little bit of that plus FDD plus XP. I kind of blended a little. So each of us described kind of how we approached software development. So that's where I learned for the first time things like DSDM that Ari van Bennekom talked about. Never heard of it. Never heard of Scrum. XP, of course, was very popular. So there's a big XP contingent there. So everybody kind of explained a little bit about how they worked and what their processes were. And then, the beauty is there's not a lot of really solid memories.
Yeah,
I think
it makes it better. Yeah,
it does. Yeah, it's kind of a blessing. But I do remember the exercise that you're talking about was, I think Martin was getting at, putting some concepts that were important to us, kind of like on a large, almost like today you might do it with sticky notes up on a board, but in this case it was just some index cards. And because we were trying to combat the heavyweight processes that dominated the industry and the rational marketing machine that dominated. None of our little methods had any kind of market share. And so we're trying to get at a little bit of what elements might be in common, almost like a bunch. I think if you get a bunch of object modelers together, you're probably going to get some kind of
exactly,
and then build some abstraction. So I think it was something along those lines. And I know for sure I put a word honesty on a card, and I use that in the sense of, especially with DoD project management, Gantt charts, all kinds of things that were an illusion. And it's not that it's dishonest, but it's that you can't be 90% done with something, right? You're either so it was that kind of it was the experience of living in that old world, and the methods and the processes that we were using really promoted you're either done or not. There's no partial credit, and it's the frequent change of working results. So I know that was one of the big points that I remember tossing a card in there, because to me that was
and it's like I've just heard, and I do want to interview Martin as well. And I spoke with Chat Hendrickson the other day, and he said, I was saying, like, can you please help me get in touch with Kent and Martin, because I have some questions for them too, because I think some of the things that they also did should be, in my opinion, discussed a little bit further, but I know everybody's busy. I also wanted to ask you about Michael Beadle, and what was your recollection as far as his contribution and his, just does anything stand out? I know it's been 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, some folks were more quiet than others. I do remember, right, I'm pretty sure I rode the ski lift with him. I remember we had some nice conversations. And then also, I think we probably got together on the 10th anniversary too, if I recall. So I might be muddying some of the recollections, but I think there were, I was probably pretty sure I was pretty vocal, but maybe not overbearing, but I had a lot of opinions, and I had a lot of experience with heavyweight and trying to do the right thing. Especially my Defense Department experience. You can imagine, contracts, of course, we have to do contracts to get the work, but, it's build a rapport. The contracts are the last resort. Things like, creating crazy amounts of documentation just because some process said it, that's wasting money. So, a lot of these things are near and dear and important to me from the kind of work I was doing and trying to do it in a more agile, more lightweight manner. And I think Mike was coming from, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look at my notes. I wonder if I wrote anything down if he spoke. So I know like Kent and, the XP group, the Scrum group, probably Alistair, Jim and Crystal, and did Mike give an introduction? He might have, I don't recollect.
Is it true that like somebody said like it was him that recommended, like how did you guys I come up with Agile? Like was he the one that recommended or showed the book, or like, because I think that you guys were, or maybe do you have any recollection of how you guys decided on Agile?
I have potentially made up stories in my head. I don't know. And I think it's a mystery. So it's, at the time I was working with some chaos theory, enhanced fighter maneuverability, fighter agility. So I was doing research in that area. And, I used to admire the barn swallows at my house, and you could see how they could dynamically change their plan form, put the wings out and really turn hard, or sweep them back and sweep their tail back and go really fast. And, so either the word was mentioned and I said, oh yeah, because I've been working on that.
What you've been thinking about, yeah.
And then fighter planes are way more agile than bombers, or or I mentioned something. I don't know. I don't actually know. All I can say is it either resonated because I was doing work in that area, or maybe I tossed it out as a synonym, to what we're
just as a
Yeah, because the thing that I remember is Alistair didn't want to be known as a lightweight anything. Like he goes, yeah, guys, being called a lightweight, that's not good. So like even though the conference was lightweight methodologists, that's a bad word. So I think that's what, humorously, I think that's what kind of kicked off. Yeah, we got to call it something else. And certainly the idea is to allow teams to be much more, reactive and dynamic and be able to move and not be stuck in a giant, slow waterfall heavyweight process. So, as we discuss the benefits of the kinds of lightweight methodologies we were practicing, agility certainly was a really good word.
Yeah. Why did you guys decide like on over? Like it's I don't know who I was talking to or heard speaking, maybe Jim Benson, where like saying over, it's almost like fundamentally flawed because it picks one over the other versus like it's a balance between these, right? It's not one. And people, like when I teach in classes, and I try to make that point that it's not one versus not. And even though you guys pointed down at the bottom, but did you consider anything, or was just immediately this over that?
I don't recall why or how that came about, but I would surmise it was because we had a lot of pretty wide range of experience in the room. I'd been doing a lot of consulting with different companies, and I think I'd like to say it expressed the breadth of our experience and the humility with which we acknowledge there's no one size fits all. There is no, not every context is not the same. And you need to use your brain. we think we got to the basic gist for immutable, I would say immutable traits of teams and doing software delivery. So I think the gist is right. The matter of degree is left up to the reader. So, I think it's a powerful level of ambiguity, so that people have to stop and think. They can't just blindly follow. You can do Scrum in name only, but you can't follow the Agile Manifesto in name only. You have to swing the pendulum for each of those sort of elements,
Exactly.
each of those dimensions to suit your needs.
Yeah, and I think especially like maybe Alistair was talking about like how the individuals interactions over process and tools is like people don't even read after that almost like that's such a attention grabber it resonates with everybody. Like even if you just left it at that, I think that's how powerful that first value is.
Yeah, it's super powerful. Absolutely. I mean, I like to say I'm a big process nut. And I've built and sold tools. I love tools, but none of those have the impact that I've said for decades. You put a bunch of really good people in a room, they'll create a process. They'll even create tools if necessary. You don't need Agile. You don't need Scrum. You don't need Lean. They'll reinvent something that works. That's the power of the people. If you have the right people and the right culture and the ability to explore and learn, you'll get good results.
Well, that's the thing. And I think, as you were saying, you got to use your brain and, some of the things that you guys stood for and what the Agile Manifesto is like use your brains. And you joke around, or maybe you don't joke around, you talk about RUP and like IBM and what it was. And like today, I mean, it's a good and a bad thing, but if you look at SAFe, if you look at Scrum, right, like XP, if XP had the marketing, or maybe if XP had Ken Schwaber, XP would have been but and the good thing is that specifically, I think Ken, like I don't think Agile or what we know as today Agile or Scrum would be without Ken and some of the ideas that he had. How popular Scrum has become and how popular SAFe for that reason, I think too. But we all know you can't really follow, I call these recipes, and I think I call it in every single interview that I do, but like it's almost same things that you guys were fighting 20 years ago, and we need somebody to come up to say like, hey, it's not none of these frameworks, you got to contextualize, you got to get people to start thinking, right? Because that's almost like the Agile Manifesto 2.0 or something, just like get away from frameworks, start thinking.
Add a fifth bullet, use your brain. Damn it. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's SAFe, God bless its soul, it does remind me of RUP, in that RUP, if I ever had a question about software development back then, I'd pull up my CD with RUP and I could find, oh, that's what that acronym means. It's the software development requirements specification or some such crap.
Exactly.
Here's the role, here's the 3 roles that have to create these deliverables, and boom, there's your recipe. And SAFe, at least SAFe, like I like to joke that I can close my eyes on a SAFe diagram, put my finger on it, open my eye and go, yeah, I agree with that. Because I might have landed on some Agile principle or some Lean principle. And, I don't have any issues with any of that. And, I think in the hands of the right kind of organization, SAFe can work.
Exactly.
But in practice, some of my observations and some of my fears from attending some courses is the lure of a command and control enterprise organization who can't do Agile in the small and thinks that maybe if I apply this larger framework, it'll go better. The lure, from what I can tell, is it's very prescriptive. So it has a ton of references, even templates for certain documents. It's got starting like starter recipes. So it's extremely enticing in that, if we put this into our organization, now people will know what to do. They didn't know what to do before, but now this is more prescriptive. And so it's that it fits the mindset. And I'm sure Leffingwell would cringe. Like, that's not what, it's like.
I think they're all like, I took actually the class with him, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. And I've been part of SAFe implementation. Like Dean knows, right? Like a lot of it is like people are asking for it. And, there's no doubt in my mind that Dean, and I think he's been explicit about it in the sense that, I think, and you've said it before, tool with the fool is still a, or fool with the tool is still a fool, right?
Yes.
So it's same thing. Like, I've been in organizations where they just blindly, they bring consulting company, you train everybody on SAFe, you're there. And, after 6 months, it slowly starts falling apart because everybody starts fighting for their own little fiefdom again. And like, old habits kick in. But all those patterns, the people don't fully understand why certain things are safe. So they start compromising things and it slowly starts falling apart. So like you said, with more experienced organizations and people that want to think is like dissect the SAFe and say what's working for us, what's not, what do we need to change? It's going to work. For people that blindly apply it, it's not going to work.
And that's the same thing with Scrum or anything Agile. And that's what we try to do when I'm working with teams is try to infuse that more of the Agile mindset, more of the, because you need to try to think a little more holistically and understand the nuances of how these elements and how these different pieces interact, and not lose sight of, we're trying to deliver value, we're trying to make customers smile, we're trying, and I like to use the phrase that, mind the gap, reduce the gap in time between doing something and getting feedback. And, that plus the people, process, and tools, there's not a lot of complexity to some of these ideas, but the devil is in the details of trying to deliver it, trying to simplify things, trying to build that kind of a culture. And it's oftentimes elusive.
Yeah. And I was listening to you, I think your talk in Greece that you were giving, and just as I was thinking, like, things to ask you. And one of the things that stood out, like you were trying to depict Agile or describe it, like, I think you were saying, like, how would you describe it to your mother? And one of the things that stood out is, like, it's almost like you want to create hypothesis to validate something, and then you want to have the shortest feedback loop to validate, to see if you're on the right track or not. So like a lot of times that's really the essence. Doesn't matter if you're doing software development or doing, you create something that you want to validate, and what's the quickest way that I can find out if that's true or not, or if I need to adjust.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, that requires humility. So to really try to, it's a bit of a development, personal developmental journey of your mind to be able to step above, your expert self, because the expert self is often the enemy, and it can be the customer is an expert and thinks they know exactly what kind of thing you need to build. Right. I've heard that story before. Or the developer, the UX team does this full-blown. It comes back to the matter of degrees, and it's a risk mitigation. And I think my engineering background with that holistic view maybe makes it a little easier for me to try to understand that what parts of the system present the most risk, and and how can I shorten the learning to see if the hypothesis is provable or not. And yeah, it's that kind of an attitude that's.
But that's, yeah, and that's tough. I mean, like at least when I talk to, there's more and more, but like developers don't have that systemic big picture view. And a lot of times, at least the developers that have been, I don't know, programming for decade plus, it's usually it's like, leave me alone, right? Let me just do my job, let me code. And are you still seeing that? And that's part of that mindset shift, right? That you're talking about, trying to see the big picture, understand the big picture.
Yeah, and sadly, I don't have any magic secret weapons or potion. For example, talking with one organization, a couple of senior developer and developer. All right, let's have some discussions around behavior-driven development. Let's instead of you write the code, maybe if you're lucky, you write some unit tests, but you damn well aren't writing any acceptance tests, because that's quality assurance. I'm just going to write my code and send it to the next step, and then they're going to figure out what the feature was, and then they're going to write tests. How about we bring that forward in time? How about you work instead to write those acceptance tests? Oh, but won't that slow me down?
Yeah.
Well, maybe your current self, it'll slow you down a little bit, but overall, you'll deliver value faster. You'll learn to get a little cocky about my code isn't broken. Go check somebody else's code. My code's fully tested, and I'm pretty sure it's so and then even the senior developer on this one call that I remember, he goes, well, does the QA person then write those acceptance tests, those behavior cucumber tests? Like, they help, but no, the whole point is, anyway, it's that's what you're combating is I just want to code. I can't, it's hard for me to see the value in maybe
understanding like the bigger problem, like being like understanding like what's the business problem that we're trying to solve, understanding the business, right? And then saying, okay, how it's me just programming is not going to solve the problem. Maybe, understanding the bigger picture, understanding how I can help, solve that problem is that kind of thinking that goes behind it. And I've been teaching at university recently, and like it's interesting how kids these days are going like, and at least developers are thinking more as, I'm a problem solver. Now I'm just developing. And I think part of it is like it's being pushed in schools too, and people that are teaching as well are saying like you have to look at yourself as a problem solver, and you have to look at things systematically rather than through your own point of view, or maybe through your own specialty.
And part of the essence of Agile is doing less, right? It's if I'm good at writing sort of the acceptance tests, that lets me know when I'm done, so I don't overbuild a feature. I don't go color outside the lines, and I like to use phrases like, try to think of what the minimum you need, and then maybe do a little less, because you might still not be right, and then go test it. So it's how do you try to instill that ability to calibrate, and that comes if you are able to paint the bigger picture, and people feel more part of the whole, versus I'm stuck in a silo and I'm just doing this job, and I just come in and I code all day. And I don't want to have to think, or I'm not allowed to think beyond that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I recently worked with California DMV a little bit, and you said you've worked many years with the Department of Defense. I'm assuming that's what you refer to as you say DoD.
Yes, correct.
And like, I've heard your thoughts like on government in general, but like I think we're screwed when it comes to like waste of money. When I'm serious, you probably know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
and it hasn't changed much. I mean, like I've also spent a lot of time working in the public sector and working with public, and it's kind of sad to see how much money and how much is wasted. But also like I tell people like it's almost like if you want to go back in time, go work in government and some of these biggest agencies because they're still doing things that were done 20 years ago, from contracts to how still have cobalt uh developers. Actually, you don't have people are retiring and you don't have enough people to actually maintain these systems.
yeah, right. I used to say technical debt can get so bad you go bankrupt.
Yeah, I
You
mean it's
know,
like any debt, right? You can
yeah,
if you acquire too much debt. uh
yeah, and smaller. Yeah, but in certain organizations, there is no feedback, there is no pressure. It's just it
uh,
gets slower and slower, and you can spot it. I remember being at my local library. This is probably 15, 20 years ago. The kids were younger, probably a long time ago. And I could tell by them pecking away that, the software just sucked. It's like, if I say, can you show me that? And they,
uh,
oh my God. Like, sometimes it's embarrassing to admit you're in software
yeah.
because, or my wife would be on the phone with some, pharmacy or insurance or a bank or credit card, Venmo or something. And then, she'll mutter some goofy thing that's seemingly impossible. And I'll just say, that's because whoever wrote the software for these people on the other end of the phone didn't put a solution in there for your problem. And so their hands are tied. They can't do anything and go blame the software. It's
Yeah.
yeah. And it's I used to say, as an aerospace engineer coming to the software world, and seeing some really horrendously architected systems, I used to say things like, yeah, most people wouldn't set foot in a building or drive over a bridge or fly in an airplane if they could see it was built like some software is, because you could,
Exactly.
even a layperson would know, oh boy, that looks like crap. That doesn't look safe. I'm not going into that software.
Yeah.
But in our world, we can't see that, or at least most of us, or we choose not to. And I think that's one of our biggest conundrums as an industry is, to me, you should just keep like rebuild your software every couple of years.
Well,
Like,
that's too, but like in government too, like it's just like my concern is that I don't see a site, like for some of these things, like legislation needs to change laws, and like it's like I don't know, like if you're still working with some of these agencies, but it's like it's really difficult for me to be positive or assume that they're gonna get out of the mess that they're in. And it's just like, oh, we get new money next year, make sure that we spend the money from this year, because if we don't spend it we're not going to get it, which
right.
is fundamentally flawed.
Yep.
It's just more waste.
Yep. That's correct. That's why I call it Fedzilla, because it just keeps
Yeah.
eating more and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and doesn't solve any more problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're right.
So maybe to switch it up, that's kind of sad, and just in general, I think it's sad how much money is wasted from that perspective. But tell me about the cow tail squeezer. I heard your stories about it, but how did you get to work on the cow tail squeezer? Uh, uh, uh,
Yeah.
how
There's a couple.
how someone gets that project or initiative?
That's a good question. How did Bestcorp find us? My little company. How did that happen? I don't even remember. But yeah. So engineering, you're often, like you can imagine with aerospace, if a lot of competing requirements.
Mhm.
So same thing with the cowtail squeezers. The competing requirements are it's a really rough environment because they're out in the wild. They're not really, you don't go pet these cattle. They'll kill you if you walked into the pen. They'll probably just trample you. So it's a really rough environment, and this thing has to last for a certain number of days. It has to have a battery that can last that amount of time as well. And it's not a clean environment, so it's wet and poopy and right. So, and then it needs to have a certain amount of force to every so often turn on and apply a little squeeze. And that little squeeze was researched by some PhD that the joke is from sea slugs to humans, that along the median line, along your spine, it's like if you couldn't tell if it was left or right, just that little, there's something annoying me. It increased libido. It also increased appetite. So the idea was to help reduce the use of steroids, and to try to help build up
naturally,
do it more natural. And they even found it helped with Parkinson's, all kinds of funny things. But the cowtail squeezer was a good example of finding the sweet spot where I had to research solenoids and power and force of squeezing and plot the variables to find something that would meet all of those different requirements. And then we actually, the other, so that's a good story about, it's not unlike building software, where sometimes you have to compromise. You don't necessarily have to build everything that somebody conceives of. Sometimes you need to find a balance, and sometimes you need to have competing interests sort of battle it out and strike a point that, all right, and maybe everybody had to compromise, but we got something out the door. So that's a lesson for software too. And then we actually built, this is another good lesson. So there was a trade show they wanted to go to, and they wanted a certain kind of a demo software to be able to show stuff. I forget the details, but it was going to be used once, throwaway software. We needed it, in like a couple weeks time, I forget, maybe a month. And so I said to two of the developers that worked for me, Mike and Ed, I said, I don't care what you do it in. I don't care how you do it. You can use Visual Basic for all I care, because just get it to work, and then it doesn't have to work again, right? So it doesn't need to be maintained. And, normally kind of building things right is often the fastest way, but not always. Sometimes, treat it like a prototype, just get it up and running. I think I said, I'll charge them 10,000.
Yeah.
It only took us 5,000, and I gave the other 5,000 to the guys. Here you go. Here's what's left over. Enjoy. But that's another good example of
keep it simple, right?
Yeah, and context matters.
Yeah.
I'm not building something to put the space shuttle up in the sky. This is just a throwaway prototype demo thing for a trade show. So dial it down.
Yeah. Now all the way to 11. Yeah.
So yeah, that's very, very funny. Yeah, that's probably the funniest thing I ever worked on.
That sounds like a funny thing. When I heard about the cowtail squeezer, I was like, I gotta ask John how he got that gig.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, there was a dairy cow who, it's called going off feed, and it's dangerous. When a cow goes off feed, it's hard to get their gut restarted, so they can die. And so there was a dairy cow that was off feed, and the farmer, said, yeah, sure, I'll experiment with it. So they put the thing on the dairy, and they're much nicer. You can go up to them and pet them and, put the thing on. And then the guy, Bill, hit the button, turned it on for a little while. And there's a little bit of a delayed reaction. I forget, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. Yeah. And the cow suddenly kind of like it wouldn't eat, even though he had beautiful hay. Kept trying to feed it good stuff. And then it got up, went over and ate, and then he turned it off, and then it sat back down. or, laid back down.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he repeated that 2 or 3 times. It was literally like a switch that for unknown reasons, it caused hunger, and it got up and ate. So, it demonstrated that it can also help to save the animals' lives without the need for, veterinary and
Or
injections.
any chemical. Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
pretty natural. Yeah.
So it's a really strange.
Yeah. You guys haven't tried that with humans, huh?
I think they were. Yeah, I think they were trying it for some kind of patients.
Different, yeah, yeah. So maybe as a last question here, I also got a kick out of Giovanni and Johan analogy. Your Italian and German heritage and background. So maybe like from those two perspectives, from Giovanni, Italian, and Johan, the German, what do you think? What kind of message would Giovanni give to the Agile community versus Johan?
Yeah,
And I'm assuming this is, I don't know, is this Southern Italy where, people are a lot, at least I have some friends from Southern Italy where they're, this is how it is. And if they didn't say how it is, it would be disrespectful.
well, it's because I've been working for the past 2 years with John Turley at Adaptivist. He's helped me learn more about like vertical development of your own not like software, human development.
I know. I'm very familiar with that.
Matter of fact, I've started a course with Harthill to learn more about this kind of development, because it's fascinating. It's kind of the missing piece. It's kind of like so it's taken me a while to listen to the fact that there are sometimes different people on my shoulder, and those it's like a muscle that's you have to learn to exercise and let it go. Most time we will often tamp down that kind of.
Well, it's almost, and the way that I describe cognitive, what you're referring to is cognitive development, human or adult cognitive development. It's like operating systems. So if you have Windows ME running, right, it's different than whatever the latest version is. And some of those at certain times have advantages. But a lot of times we don't even know what operating systems we're currently running and how we degrade, to. But I've studied, and I'm writing a book actually on that whole cognitive development, and I agree. Like that's the missing piece in Agile and psychology in general. Like we don't understand the people. We don't understand. Like it's like almost one size fits all, and that's not
Right.
what we are. We're a lot more dynamic.
Yeah. So I've learned to. Typically, not always. Sometimes Giovanni blurts out, and my heart rate goes up, and my voice, like my head wants to explode. One of the folks I'm working with, I have 3 other coaches that we're working on a project right now with the company, and he was describing kind of a sprint review where they were looking over the software that was built. I forget if the sprint was like a month long or something like that, but the gist of his report this morning was, I just got out of that, watched it, and well, the PO wasn't happy and blah blah blah. Like it got like a bad review, like had all kinds of comments about it and stuff like that. And yet the heavyweight process has a lot of work up front, UX and this and that, like and that's what we're trying to help them with. It's the level, like you think you're taking it to the nth degree. So maybe if we tell them everything they need to do, it'll be right. Maybe, but apparently not. Right? They just did a month, and then you're not happy with it. So let's have some conversations around, can we, number one, that's kind of demoralizing. Number two, can we shorten that? So I joked with my colleagues. I said, yeah, I'm trying to not let Giovanni come out and have my head explode about about how this happened, like I don't want to shake their neck. Like, it's like I don't want to say it's not that hard, because apparently it is hard, but the secret to my success is typically simplifying things, get stuff in smaller, paint just enough picture, do a small amount of work, get some feedback, and don't think you know it all, and don't think that doing more up front is going to yield perfection at the end, because
Exactly.
it's rare. You need to have tighter loop cycles. So need to break that down, need to put smaller things in the pipeline, show some things, and you need to understand elements of risk. So, Giovanni likes to come out in those situations where, because I think what happens is I empathize the pain. Like that's soul crushing to development team. We just worked on something. That you probably over specified, if I had to guess. I need to, we're about to embed with some teams to see some more, details, but I'm going to guess, just judging by, the 14-step process, it's probably over designed, and you still didn't get the right answer. And and it's nobody's doing, I always say no one's coming to work trying to do the wrong thing, but it's that sort of
the system, or this, it gets better.
Right. It's the system, and how can we help break down, some of those walls and some of those silos, so that we can have better outcomes and deliver more value. And so Giovanni doesn't have to come out. So that's the joke is, sometimes, and that's our
Giovanni takes over.
Yeah, and that's our code word. Like if I'm on a call and Turley says Giovanni, okay, Giovanni, like, oh, yeah, I need to go on mute. I need to chill out and bring out the German, the more the more engineer, and not the emotional.
Exactly.
But that's kind of the joke behind that is, Giovanni can get me in trouble sometimes because I'm passionate, right? I mean, this is, I often joke, software would be easy without all the people, but at the same time, it's very people oriented, and it can be a lot of fun, or it can be a lot of misery. And to me, it's how can we help folks learn how to deliver more value more quickly, make the business happy, make customers happy, and in turn make you happy. And it is possible. So I think that's one of the reasons Giovanni comes out is I feel the suffering, of the
Well, thank you. I know we're almost up on our time, and thank you for taking the time. And I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I really liked, and I have tried to pick up some of the stuff that you haven't talked, or some of the stuff that I didn't know. I'm not sure if there was something that I didn't know what to ask you. Is there anything that you think I should have asked you that I didn't, that I can edit it out?
No, I don't. I mean, I mean, it's fun to talk about this stuff. I could talk about it hours. No, I really appreciate your time, and you ask good questions, and it's fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. I was talking to Mike Cohn, and I was like joking around. Like I was like, Mike, for us younger folks, you guys are getting older, and time is clicking, and I want to get it. Some of the people that actually paved the way for us. I know Ryan well. He used to come up here to Portland, Maine too, and he was telling me when he was interviewing all the Agile Manifesto signeries and authors, but it's like we wouldn't have jobs probably if it wasn't for Agile, and like the jobs that we currently have, we'll be doing something else. And I think we're all thankful for it, as whatever came out of it. I know nobody expected it, but we're thankful for you guys getting together and creating what you did, because I think many people's lives are better because of, I think.
and that is touching. I mean, being at different conferences around the world over the past 20 years, people genuinely are thankful. So I know we hit a special chord, and it resonated with so many people, and it's almost like it gave them the freedom, like, oh, thank goodness now I
Exactly.
can. And so I know it's meaningful and it's humbling to have been a part of that, even though it was sort of accidental.